the first time in her professional career she has held that status at a Grand Slam. This is not a footnote. Seeding is the institution's formal acknowledgement that a player belongs among the elite, that her ranking demands structural protection in the draw, and this particular court, Roland Garros, holds personal weight that goes beyond ranking points. In 2021, Eala won the Roland Garros junior doubles title on these exact grounds. She first conquered this city as a teenager. Now she returns as a seeded professional, and 500,000 people tried to break the internet to watch. The match she is walking into on Sunday, May 24th, is against Iva Jovic, world number 17, a genuine teenager prodigy who reached the Australian Open quarterfinals in January 2026, the youngest American player to do so since Venus Williams in 1998. This is not a walkover. This is a first-round match carrying the energy of a quarterfinal, and the ticket market figured that out before the draw was even announced. The system was not built for what Alex Eala represents. Roland Garros uses a lottery ticketing structure that, by design, turns away 90 to 95% of fans who register. That failure rate was tolerable when demand arrived in predictable waves tied to seedings and draws. It is not tolerable now, because the demand for Eala does not wait for the draw. It does not wait for a court assignment. It does not wait for a match schedule. It arrived on April 22nd, weeks before the tournament began, and it crashed the server before a single seed was placed. The 30-minute browsing limit that Roland Garros implemented as an emergency measure, the 15-minute cart countdown, the cascade of fans expelled from the queue before they could complete a purchase, these are not minor inconveniences. They are the documented evidence of an institution scrambling to manage something it never anticipated. A number 38 ranked player generating the kind of digital crush that typically belongs to a Grand Slam final. And when official channels failed, the secondary market responded with ruthless efficiency. VIP box seats for Chatrier sessions during the tournament are reportedly listed from $1,500, climbing past $2,000 for the sessions where Eala is scheduled to appear. Prices that, on the secondary market, have historically belonged to quarterfinals week, not opening rounds. The people profiting from that gap are not Roland Garros. They are not Eala. They are the brokers who recognized her commercial gravity before the institution did. The court assignment question is not theoretical either. At the 2026 Australian Open, just 4 months ago, the New York Times and The Athletic ran a specific piece questioning whether Grand Slams need to rethink how they assign courts, pointing directly at the tension between Eala's ranking and the crowd she commanded on Court 6. Roland Garros has not publicly resolved that question for 2026, but 2 days before the first ball is struck on May 22nd, fans were already flooding Court 4 just to watch her practice. Not play, practice. The crash, April 22nd, 2026. 500,000 people hitting a refresh at the same moment. That is the documented, verified number, and confirmed by Roland Garros's own Instagram, reported by The Big Lead and MSN Sports. The comparison to the Taylor Swift era's tour ticket crisis did not come from a tabloid. It came from fans who had lived through both and recognized the pattern. When was the last time a first-round women's singles match generated a digital siege of that scale? The honest answer is, it has not happened, not in the recorded history of professional tennis until now. The crash was not the result of exceptional seeding placement or a defending champion halo. Eala was not yet confirmed on Philippe Chatrier. Court assignments had not been announced. The draw had not been made public. The demand was unconditional. 500,000 people came for her specifically without needing to know the details first. The practice crowd. May 22nd, 2026, Monday of tournament week, 2 days before the first match. Court 4, not the main show court, not the stadium with 50 cameras pointed at it, Court 4. A BSCBN sports desk ran it as a standalone headline. Fans flocked to Eala's Roland Garros practice session. Nobody buys a flight to Paris for a warm-up rally. Nobody stands 3 rows deep at an auxiliary court in the morning heat for a player hitting ground strokes at 70%, except for her. Put yourself in the position of the player on the other side of the net during that practice. You are a training partner or a hitting partner doing a professional job, and the gallery behind the fence is packed. Not for you, not for any match, but for a 20-year-old Filipina in the middle of a standard warm-up session. That is not a fan club. That is gravity. The peer witness, Amanda Anisimova, Dubai, 2026. This is where the story stops being a numbers argument and becomes something harder to dismiss. During Eala's match in Dubai earlier this year, Amanda Anisimova, seeded number 6 at this Roland Garros, a WTA top 10 player with enough match preparation demands to fill every available hour, chose to sit in the stands and watch, not as scouting, not because she was scheduled to play the winner. She stayed because, in her own direct words, I stuck around for it because the atmosphere was so great. Style B, quote, into interpretation, Anisimova went further. She called Eala such a good representation of her country, adding, "She's so young and she carries herself so well." This was unprompted. No journalist asked Anisimova to evaluate Eala's national significance. She offered it. When a current top 10 player voluntarily becomes an audience member at your match and then volunteers a character assessment nobody asked for, your cultural footprint has crossed a threshold that rankings alone cannot measure. The pattern, tournament by tournament. This is not a Roland Garros anomaly. The record is consistent across every tournament Eala has entered in 2026. Auckland, the crowds came. Australian Open Court 6 overflowed, and the New York Times wrote about it. Abu Dhabi, Doha, Dubai, documented fan surges. Indian Wells, a BSCBN named it the Eala effect, in a segment that accumulated over 40,000 views. Stuttgart's Porsche Grand Prix, attendance patterns shifted following her entry into the main draw. Every venue, every surface, every time zone. The pattern across 11 months is not coincidence. It is a consistent directional force that has been building since the start of this year and has reached its loudest expression on the clay of Paris. The fan validation moment. Those of you who have been in these stands, physically or digitally, since before the mainstream noticed, already knew this was coming. While television networks were still deciding where to position the camera, you were already watching. The world is only now catching up to what you understood months ago, that this level of attention is not manufactured, not inflated by one viral moment, but earned by a pattern of authentic volcanic fan engagement that does not switch off between tournaments. In November 2024, Rafael Nadal retired from professional tennis, 14 Roland Garros titles, the most decorated clay court career in the history of the sport. His retirement was not the end of a chapter, it was the end of an era. Months later, Nadal returned to a tennis court for the first time since that retirement. His first competitive practice hit, his reintroduction to the sport he had defined for 2 decades. He stepped onto the court at his own academy in Manacor, Mallorca, and he chose Alex Eala, not a top 10 player, not a Grand Slam champion, the 20-year-old from the Philippines who trains at his academy. Eala described the experience in an interview with The National. It was crazy. It was my first time ever hitting with him, and I was so nervous, and it was definitely physically demanding for me. I mean, he was off court for like a year, and I've been training strong, and I feel like, man, I was so far. But it was just such a great experience to really absorb all that knowledge. Just to say that you hit with Rafa, it's insane. But I feel so lucky and so blessed. 14 Roland Garros titles, one choice for his first practice back. There is no press conference statement, no podcast endorsement, no promotional campaign that carries the weight of that single decision. Nadal communicates in actions, and his actions said everything. Now she arrives at his cathedral, Roland Garros, the red clay that bore the imprint of his career, as a seeded player, with the secondary market pricing her sessions at 4 figures. The king of clay did not come back from retirement to hit with just anyone. What is happening in Paris right now is not a local story. It is the visible leading edge of a structural shift that the WTA has not yet formally addressed, and that professional tennis cannot afford to ignore much longer. Southeast Asia, 700 million people, growing middle classes, a documented hunger for sports identity, has historically been treated as a peripheral market in professional tennis. The sport's commercial architecture was built around Europe and North America. Eala's presence at Roland Garros 2026 alongside Janice Chen of Indonesia, who became the first Indonesian woman in the top 50 since Yayuk Basuki in 1998, represents the arrival of that market at the sport's most prestigious address. The fans are not coming from the periphery anymore. They are crashing the servers. The popularity premium question that the New York Times raised in January is now a Paris question. Should court assignments at Grand Slams reflect a player's commercial gravity alongside ranking? The ticket market has already voted. $2,000 for VIP seats during Eala's sessions is a market-generated answer. The WTA and Roland Garros have not publicly responded. That silence will not hold much longer, and the matchup calendar ahead makes this moment even more significant. If Eala defeats Jovic on Sunday, she enters a section of the draw that includes number 1 seed Aryna Sabalenka, and in the same quarter, Coco Gauff, the defending Roland Garros champion. A potential Eala versus Gauff quarterfinal between the reigning French Open title holder and the player who is redefining what a tennis fan base looks like in 2026, that match would be the most commercially explosive women's quarterfinal Roland Garros has staged in years. Watch the Wimbledon and US Open draws with that matchup potential in mind. The stakes are building well beyond this first round. 3 days before her Roland Garros first-round match, Eala lost in Strasbourg. The opponent was not a top seed, not a seeded player at all. Oleksandra Olejnikova, a Ukrainian qualifier, 3 sets, a clay court defeat in the final tune-up tournament before the French Open. This is the part that never makes the highlights. A quiet loss on a minor clay court in France, 3 days before the biggest clay event on the calendar. In Rome, a week earlier, she had defeated Olympic silver medalist Wang Xinyu 6-4, 6-3, then run into a loss against Elena Rybakina, a former French Open champion, in the next round. From Rome, she went to Strasbourg, lost to a qualifier, and then she came to Roland Garros. She was on court 4 on May 22nd, the morning after arriving, hitting ground strokes in front of a crowd that had traveled from another continent to watch her warm up. There was no statement posted on social media about the Strasbourg result. There was just the work, racket in hand, red clay under her feet, and the noise of people who flew to Paris specifically because she was going to be on this court. Earlier this year in Rome, she said,
I'm finding my footing and I know that I can do well. I'm a much better player physically, mentally than I was last year.
I'm finding my footing and I know that I can do well. I'm a much better player physically and mentally than I was last year. And we've really been working hard, my team and I. And hopefully the things we've been working on will reflect more on my game. That is what accountability sounds like at 20 years old. Not excuses, not deflection, just the quiet certainty of someone who knows the work is not finished and shows up the next morning anyway, in front of a crowd that crashed a website to be there. 500,000 people crashed Roland Garros' website before the draw was announced. VIP seats for her sessions hit $2,000 on secondary markets. A WTA top 10 player voluntarily sat in the stands in Dubai just to watch the energy. The greatest clay court player in tennis history came back from retirement and chose her as his first practice partner. And at the center of all of it, a 20-year-old from Quezon City quietly told the world, "I was a little in denial." The world is not in denial. What is happening at Roland Garros 2026 is something the sports infrastructure was never designed to contain. Alex Eala has not just entered the French Open as a seeded player, she has arrived as the most culturally consequential presence at this tournament, regardless of seed number, regardless of ranking, regardless of what a first-round record says. The crashed server, the flooded practice court, the four-figure resale prices, these are not predictions. They are receipts, and they were generated before she hit a single ball in competition this fortnight. Retrospective inevitability demands one honest admission. The signs were always there. Every packed practice